Hello and welcome to The Real Crush from the Comic Crush. This is our pop culture movie and TV podcast. I'm your host, Paul, as always. As you may remember from the last few weeks, we're doing our Indiana Jones special. And we've kind of come nearly to the end now. We're at Kingdom of the Crystal Scroll. So this is episode 4 of this series of specials. We've got one more to go where we'll try and review Dial of Destiny. But because this particular podcast is going to be, easy, but not as easy as it used to be, I've brought back Keith. Hello, Keith. How are you?
Doing? Yeah, good. Not too bad. Thank you. Not too bad. Thanks for having me back.
No. I'm really pleased you could come back, and I feel like, if nothing else, we've achieved something we talked about for ages, where we've managed to do an entire series of podcasts together.
Yeah.
So
it's been good.
We're nearly at the end. We only got one more to go after this, so we've got to wait till the end of June. Where we are now, recording ahead, not to ruin the magic, but we're at the beginning of June, so hopefully we'll kind of reconvene at the end when you guys would have seen this podcast and come back for a review of Dial of Destiny. And I'll be interested to see what Keith thinks of it because I know
I'm just trying to avoid everything at the moment.
It's tough.
Hard.
It's tough. Yeah. So all 4 movies have dropped on Disney Plus right now.
Yes.
Minus the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which it was hinted that they would be on there. And it was also hinted that it would be the edited versions that I believe you mentioned on one of the earlier shows, Keith. So the recut sort of 90-minute movie versions, 22 of those. However, it's not there. I've looked. It's sadly missing from the Indiana Jones oeuvre. One thing that is there, though, is a preview of Dial of Destiny, which I know you probably won't have taken a look at, but I did, and looks fantastic.
Right. Cool.
I can't really talk about the scene because I worry that it would spoil something for you, and I don't really want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to avoid that, and also all of the, the press reviews and all of that sort of critics reviews and all this sort of thing that's come out, and lots of people have sort of jumped on that bandwagon as well. So I'm just trying to avoid that. But interestingly enough, we were talking about the young Indiana Jones, and I was saying that the actor George Hall was playing like a sort of 90-year-old version of Indy in the sort of late 80s contemporary bits and whatever, and obviously you had Indy sort of aged 8 to 10 in some of the episodes, and then aged sort of 18 to 21 in other episodes, with River Phoenix supposed to have been somewhere in between, about 13 or whatever in the chronology. But also, I forgot about this, but Harrison Ford did actually appear to do the bookends to one of the episodes, which interestingly enough was set in the 1950s, so around the a few years before when Kingdom of Crystal Skull is supposed to take place, and he did it with a full beard because he was filming The Fugitive at the time and stuff. So Harrison had a full beard and all of that, but I'd completely forgotten about that until I was doing a bit of reading up on it. And I don't know whether that's included in the edited movie versions or not. I don't know. I
would think because weren't you saying they cut most of the bookends, and that's probably one of the things that got left behind, sadly. I mean, I'm just sorry not to see the show because I've never seen it. I remember reading about that cameo, in fact, but never ever seeing the show, sadly. I don't think I've seen more than 1 or 2 frames of it. Right. So I was kind of looking forward to see it, but so do we. What can you do? The movie we're here to talk about today, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, this is going to be a tough one for Keith. He's gonna sit here and tell me why he doesn't like this movie, and I'm going to sit here and tell him why he's wrong. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But I knew this would be a contentious one going in, and my hope was that you would rewatch it and somehow find something that you enjoyed.
I've got to say, I've literally just rewatched it before us doing this, and yeah, I'm afraid my opinion, sadly, I'm afraid my opinion of it has not changed. So, I was literally face palming in certain parts of it.
Okay. So, I think yes, there are some moments which are kind of slightly off register for Indiana Jones films ish, but I mean, in particular, most of the scenes featuring animals seem to have been the guiding rule as to the ones that have gone wrong. But in thinking about the trilogy, there are a ton of scenes with animals and creatures, not monsters, but insects or what have you. So I think it's kind of all part and parcel of that. I just want to say, because what I'll do is I'll say, oh, we'll talk about this as we go on, and then we won't talk about it because I'll forget. But I think the problem with Crystal Skull as a whole and the audience reaction to it, which I did feel was an audience, forgive me, Keith, an audience overreaction, was that in between 1989 and 2008, action films and the audience had moved on so significantly that it wasn't necessarily possible for them to recover that ground and give the audience what it wanted in a modern action movie, because I think it suffered almost, though not quite, because it's a far better movie in quality, from the same things that the Star Wars prequels suffered from, which was there seemed to be an effort to capture an earlier style and age of dialogue and action that unfortunately is just too far gone for the modern audience at the time and the audience it was aimed at. And it's interesting now to see people talk about, I don't know if you've seen any of the online chat about Dial of Destiny, where people have said, I don't know that there'll be an audience for this film now. I don't know that kids will latch on to this. I think that's incorrect. I think any child that's grown up in the last sort of 10 years, I suspect their parents would have showed them at the very least the first three films.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried obviously in terms of being objective and whatever. I've tried to sort of put it into context, because obviously when I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, as we covered in our episode, I was a kid. It was very, very formative time for me. It kind of inspired me, to become interested in movies and how movies were made and all of that sort of stuff. To the point that me and my friends, we'd reenact scenes that I wanted to film. Yeah. These were before, well, they weren't before the days of camcorders, but we couldn't afford camcorders in my family and stuff. Sure. So, I was wanting to make Indiana Jones short films and stuff as a kid and all that. I mean, that's how inspired I was. Obviously, by the time we got round to the third one, I was into my teenage years and whatever. But obviously, when I went to see Kingdom of Crystal Skull, I'm then a grown man in my 30s at the time, and it was quite funny because I went with a friend of mine, filmmaker Ian Diaz, but also a bunch of other people. But Ian always recounts the story because he found it very amusing, and to say I was somewhat excitable. We went to see it in Leicester Square on the opening day and everything. And to say I was excitable was an understatement. Apparently, I was like a 10-year-old boy, like that excited and whatever, going in as a grown adult and everything. But apparently, I came out at least 10 years older than I was when I went in. Apparently, yeah. I mean, well, I mean, we can go. I guess we'll go into it all, but I've certainly got reasons that this one doesn't work for me, but also it's not all bad. There are things that I like about it as well. So
Okay.
I can give both sides, but overall, this one, clearly I hadn't watched it as much as the others because it hasn't been around as long as the others. But the original three I used to watch on home video over and over and over and over when I was growing up. But this one I've watched a handful of times, perhaps.
I mean, I have seen this a few times now. I've watched this about 3 or 4 times. I really enjoyed it, with the exception of some scenes, but overall they didn't spoil the whole for me.
Right.
I did come away with that feeling of, it's not quite hit the same notes and excitement as the others has. But I think you hit upon a key thing there, whether you realised it or not, which is, I mean, first of all, I always feel 10 years older whenever I come out of a movie nowadays, Keith. And by that rationale, I should be about 250 by now. I'm sure I'm looking at. But I think the thing is we'd moved on to such a degree, and it had been such a long time between Indiana Jones films, but I was shocked that the general consensus was that, well, they shouldn't have made this one, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's a worthy addition to the canon. I think it kind of does hit some of the notes, as we talked about when we did Temple of Doom. This is kind of one of the even numbered Indiana Jones films which tend to be about non-Judeo-Christian objects, or more mysterious, weirder things. And in this case, the crystal skulls, which, there is some basis for. I remember reading about these. I remember endlessly looking at a book that one of my sisters had whenever I was around at her house, and I thumbed through this book, and there would be a picture of one of these skulls, and it was just so bizarre to look at, and just such a strange, beguiling thing, and I think that's very much kind of part of the movie. Keith, why don't you lead us into the scene you've picked?
Oh, right, we want to go with that. Okay, and then we'll flesh out other. Because, as I said, I've got reasons why I do like it.
We'll get through the scene you picked, and then we'll get through my scene, and we can come back to
cool.
to the.
The scene I've picked is quite early. I've called it Hangar 51. It starts at about 4 minutes and goes on to about the 18-minute mark. So it's about 14 minutes of action.
And do you include all the stuff at the beginning that we're seeing here with the Russians kind of breaking into the
no, I'm sort
Mexican,
I'm sort of picking it up from when they come out of they get pulled out of the trunks or boots, wherever you're from,
which includes one of the best shots in the entire movie.
Well, this is my point for choosing it, to be honest. So what I thought, and I remember being in the cinema, and even though we had the sort of gopher coming out of the Paramount mound and stuff, and then obviously the rock and roll 50s car chase thing, which George Lucas, that was sort of the era he grew up in. So I know that he's a big fan of all that stuff. That was fine. But I just thought this was so well directed. I loved it. I loved the music. I loved the scene. But also, I've got to say, best thing in the film, right, is Harrison Ford. Unbelievable. He looks amazing, because obviously he was about coming up, I think, 65 or whatever when he made this film, even though the character of Indiana Jones is supposed to be about 59 at this point. And obviously in the new one, he's 80 now, but the character would be 70 in the timeline, sort of when it's set. So he's doing the opposite of Patrick Stewart. He's playing a character who's 10 years younger than he actually is, whereas Patrick Stewart's Picard is 10 years older than Patrick Stewart. There you go. But I had to throw Star Trek in there. So we see Harrison looking great. One of the things I was so pleased they did is I'm so pleased they left his hair grey, naturally grey, and didn't try and colour that or anything, because He's completely recognizable. He doesn't look like he's really aged at all, apart from the grey hair. But you see him and he's in the classic costume. He's got the whip, he's got the fedora. We get the shadow before we see him. We get John Williams' little sting of the Indiana Jones theme, which I love. So I think that whole introduction was great. And then they introduce Mac, and played by oh God, I'm blanking.
Ray Winston.
Ray Winston, thank you. And we gather from the banter that they've got some history and they've been doing adventures for some years. The other thing I really like is it had been the same amount of time since we last saw Indiana Jones to when this is set. So it's the 19-year difference. Yeah, it was 1938 to 1957. So I kind of like that it was somewhat real time, although historical, obviously. And we gather that there's been some history, and they've been on a few adventures and a few missions, sort of post World War II missions together. We get his first line, Russians, telling us exactly where we are now. So again, in terms of the way this is performed and the way it's shot and everything is really working here, and I'm totally bought into the film at this point. I love it. I also love the fact, so we're in Nevada, we go into the warehouse, which we see 51 on the doors as it opens, and it starts playing some of the music from Raiders about the Ark of the Covenant and whatever. And it's like, oh, interesting. What are they in here for? Then we have all this bit where Indy uses gunpowder and everything to find the magnetic forces of the crate that they're looking for, which we learn was captured some decade earlier, so in the late 40s in the timeline. We meet Cate Blanchett's character on this. Again, fantastic cast of actors in this film. And they're all good actors. What they're doing is questionable, but they're all good actors.
We have Cate Blanchett playing Irina Spalko, Colonel Irina Spalko, I believe. A Russian kind of, she's kind of a mind agent, really. It's which was a kind of interesting addition to the mythos, really.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, and I'm really liking the way that I'm really liking the way that this is all introduced and whatever in terms of the characters. So that's working. As I said, they go into the warehouse. We have the standoff with the guns and the first double cross from Mac, to the triple agent, as it turns out. And I think it's quite cool that Indy then breaks into action. He gets his bullwhip and gets the guns, and it turns into a fight, and you get that first bit where he swings and he's like, oh damn, I thought it was closer and whatever, which I liked. But what I really like is when we're getting into the driving, and Mac says, when they're doing the playing chicken basically, and he goes, you don't know him, for the crash. And then Indy gets up on the rafters and whatever. Love the fact that one of the damaged crates reveals the Ark of the Covenant, which we saw being put into this warehouse at the end of Raiders. So I did like that little cue and payoff. That was good. And this fight is really enjoyable. And basically, up until him getting launched out on this rocket with one of the other Russian guards, and that's kind of where I sort of draw the end for this scene is that part. But there's a really cool fight. I like the fact that they're fighting in the control room, and the timer, the countdown, and everything gets knocked while they're fighting. I just think, really, really greatly put together action sequence. Really good to see Harrison back as Indiana Jones, looking the part, being the part. And, apparently they wanted to do sort of CG CGI bullwhip stuff, and Harrison Ford was having none of that, which I totally respect him for. You know, and yeah, so I think in terms of a sequence in the film and a way of reintroducing the character and showing us where and when we are, excellent. So I really enjoyed that scene.
I think it's a fascinating sequence because it puts us right away in the arena of science fiction, which we've not really seen in Indiana Jones before.
Yes, I've always thought of it this way: the other films, although they weren't science fiction, they all dealt with the supernatural. You know, they all had supernatural elements to them, although not overtly sci-fi. So yeah. Sorry.
Definitely. And it's interesting that you have the Roswell, New Mexico connection, and of course Hangar 51. So like that was kind of quite well done, and I quite like that. But it does take you out of the arena that the other films have previously been in, you know. And again, you have Spalko who claims to be able to read people's minds. And that is a science fiction conceit, really. That's not a supernatural conceit. It's a very definite lean towards science fiction. But why I think it was the right direction to go in is because in the 1950s, of course, there was an incredible lean towards science fiction in terms of pop culture and, in fact, in culture in general. And I think the first UFO sightings begin to start in the 40s, you know, post World War II or during World War II, and then kind of really
the end of this film.
Yeah, and really ramp up towards the 50s.
And Spielberg always, or rather Lucas always said that that's what he was kind of going for, right? Whereas the first three were like the sort of B movies of the 30s and 40s, you know, those Republic film serials and whatever. This one was supposed to reflect more the sort of films of the 50s, you know, the alien invasion films of the 50s and whatever. So and he always said that. It's interesting because when Spielberg's interviewed, he always says that he wasn't so on board with that. And I often wonder if that's why this film is the way it is.
I think there's something in that because it definitely feels like a film where Spielberg wanted to make an Indiana Jones film, but maybe not really make this Indiana Jones film. But, you know, he did apparently always say that he promised George he would come back and do one more.
Yes.
And I think it's probably the reason why he found it quite easy to sort of wash his hands in the next one and kind of go, yeah, okay, I've made my commitment. I'm not, you know.
Yes.
Because I think now he's at the point as a filmmaker where he owes the audience nothing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, hopefully later on, you know, in a few months or a few weeks rather, I'm hoping you and I can have a discussion about Jurassic Park because that's coming up for a 30th anniversary this year.
God. Yes.
And I certainly remember seeing that. And
yeah,
I think he's given the audience everything he can in terms of. I mean, I don't think we've seen everything from him as a filmmaker, but I think he's, in terms of excitement, and in terms of fun, and in terms of interest, in terms of cultural touchstones, he's given the audience everything he can. And I think he recognizes that, and it was very easy for him to go, no, I don't have to do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's doing things now that he's always wanted to do. You know, he made his, you know, a remake of West Side Story, which was a musical that he always loved, that he got to remake.
Which I've still not seen.
He's made a biopic or a semi-biopic film about his, you know, love for cinema and filmmaking and all of that. So you know, I totally respect that he's doing what he wants to do. And yeah, but I do sort of, when I watch Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I do sort of, there are points where I feel like he's more phoning it in than actually doing his magic. We'll get into that, I'm sure.
Okay, so I never feel that with this film the storytelling is unclear.
No.
And I think that's really what counts. I think there are some moments. The moment with the monkeys is pretty stupid. and doesn't feel like it belongs in this film. What other moments kind of stick out for you that don't belong?
Well, God, I mean, I could really sort of go into it. I don't want to sort of eat into the time of your scene, but
if we've got time at the end, we'll kind of
because I feel that there's actually quite a lot to unpack here, Paul. If I'm honest. But in terms of the scene you wanted me to, or you know, the scene you asked me to pick, or you asked me to pick a scene, and I have, I find that scene very difficult to fault because I find that it did everything that it needed to do in reintroducing the character and the setting that we're in. Harrison looks amazing and is great in it, so I've got, you know, I can't knock that at all. And Spielberg's direction of this scene is fantastic, and of course, the maestro John Williams. You know, the score here is fantastic, and I love the fact that you get all of the Indiana Jones beats in there, but you also get that nod to the Ark of the Covenant as well. Fantastic. So again, I know Temple of Doom I picked an opener as well, and I've kind of done an opener here, but
that's fine.
A strong opening, which is of course a staple of Indiana Jones films. I just felt this whole thing fell apart from here onwards. And
okay, that's strong. That's strong. I'm not sure I agree on that one.
Okay.
So the scene I've gone for happens just a few beats later in the film, where we're introduced to a character called Mutt.
Yes. Before you go into that, I just want to say as well, because that's one of my kind of little niggles, I guess. I feel that at this point of the films that were coming out, there was this trope that I wasn't sure that I liked, which was the son of thing. Because these films are sort of 15 or 20 years on, we had it with Superman, we had it with Die Hard, you know, and it did feel like a bit of a trope of this era. And it was never a trope that I particularly warmed to, I have to say. But
it does.
It makes sense, I guess.
It always feels like, oh, this is how we're going to carry this series of films on. Don't worry. You know, we're going to continue this on. I think with Superman, again, that's a film that I feel was very, very unfairly slighted against. Die Hard, no. It deserved every kind of brickbat thrown against it.
You turn the everyman into a superhero.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's not really well. Anyway,
I've already interrupted you. Sorry.
Not at all. We're introduced to Mutt, played by Shia LaBeouf. Now, I actually think his performance is very solid in this film. I think he's actually a very good performer. I thought he was very interesting in the first Transformers movie, where he seemed to be acting in an improv comedy, where everyone else seemed to be acting in an action film, and he just decided, no, I'm going to do this. I do think he's a very interesting, quirky little performer. However, I think a lot of the kind of public stuff we now know about him has overshadowed that. I think that's a shame that he has acted in the way he has, but I think he's got some quite serious mental health problems that need addressing. And you know, I have sympathy towards anybody suffering from those problems. But I actually think for a while there, he was looking to be a really good, interesting little performer.
Yeah, well, Spielberg certainly, you know, liked him and kind of had a thing for him and took him under his wing a bit. I mean, I thought he was very good in that film Disturbia, that sort of, you know, home locked up at home movie.
Rear Window.
It was a kind of take on Rear Window. Yeah, absolutely. And I thought he was very good in that. But yeah, I don't know. At this point, I can't say I was the biggest Shia LaBeouf fan, but good on him. That's all I can say.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, yeah, the son of thing. Now, I can't remember. Did they kind of publicly say that he would be the son of Indiana Jones before the film got released?
no, I think they were trying to sort of. Again, I was doing everything I could to avoid any spoilers, but I think the idea was, we sort of learned that at the same time as Indy in the film, but whether or not they were successful with keeping that Sturm, I don't know.
Because I feel it was kind of an obvious thing, but
I heard that Lucas wanted Mutt Williams to sort of spin off into his own adventures, and
right.
I'm kind of glad that never happened. So,
I mean, obviously the get up is it harkens back to Rebel Without a Cause.
and the Wild Ones, definitely the brand.
I'm sorry, actually, yes, the Wild One, not Rebel Without a Cause. You're absolutely right. I do apologise, Keith. But looks somewhat ridiculous in 2008 in colour, despite of when the film's set. Despite the film setting. But I like their kind of rapport together, and of course they then encounter these two Russian agents who take them on a chase through the city. Now, what I love about this scene is one, you get a lot of these action beats that are kind of not entirely dissimilar to the truck chasing Raiders in terms of putting Harrison Ford through the ringer. It's not a very spectacular chase, but the reason I like it is that it's done in what for Americans would have been a domestic setting. It's an American city. We're used to seeing Indiana Jones in jungles, in Egyptian caverns, in Indian caves, hanging off bridges, but I don't think we've ever really seen him, and correct me if I'm wrong, any of the movies up to this point, on his home turf. And the whole big chunk of the movie, the first sort of 40 minutes of the movie are all set in the US, which I thought was quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of reminded me that so this was 2008.
That's right.
When was Casino Royale?
2006.
Not Casino Royale. Sorry, I'm thinking of Skyfall, where most of the Bond
2012.
Yeah, so most of the Bond movie is set in England, and there is a thrill about seeing characters on their home turf for extended periods. I don't know why, but there just is, and I found it fascinating that he kind of a lot of the first chunk of this movie is set all in the US. Now, I also love the fact that the chase heads right back to the university, and we start to see something that features in the movie quite a bit, which is Indiana Jones, who has now kind of embraced the name Henry. Partly we find probably because his dad has passed away in the storyline of the film. We see him being a teacher. We see him being a professor. He's embraced that kind of older mindset, and he's become in a way his father, to a certain degree. And I really like that. Like, he's still making escapes, but he's also educating, because there's that fantastic moment when he rides through the library with Mutt, and one of the students decides to ask him a question about some of the coursework.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, don't read that guy. Read this guy, because he got out in the field and you guys need to get out in the field. And I love that as he's riding on the back of a
nice
motorbike, being chased by Russians. And that's why I like it. And in fact, a lot of the scenes I've picked have been the sort of slightly calmer scenes, the slightly less kind of outre scenes, the less outrageous scenes, because I kind of, after donkey's years of watching action movies and seeing countless, I think I've probably seen about 3,500 films, and I do get a bit jaded, and I do get a bit kind of bothered by seeing the same old thing again and again. And I actually like when filmmakers can go, okay, well, we're going to move this over here, and if we go just left or right, this will give us a slightly different setting, and will then start to change the scene. And I think it demonstrates something that's great about Spielberg's filmmaking, which is just using what he finds around him. And it does feel like a scene that was designed in very much the same way that the drinking scene / bar fight in Raiders was designed, which is kind of very much on the fly, very much kind of, well, where can we put these little grace notes and moments in? And I really like it because of that.
Okay.
I think it says something about Indiana Jones as a character at that time in his life, which is, I'm moving into this older, more fatherly arena.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So that's me. Now, I mean, where does it go wrong for you, the film?
Okay, well, I was, just trying to sort of sum it all up, really. But
you've got that 20 minutes.
Well, you've got a fantastic cast in this. We've talked about Kate Blanchett, Ray Winston, you've got John Hurt, Jim Broadbent, you've got all these
amazing. Of Karen Allen.
Well, I want to come to that. Right. I actually do want to come to that because, and by the way, just another little sort of Bond reference, but according to Kate Blanchett, although I'm not sure it was necessarily successful, but she was saying that she was trying to base her character on the character of Rosa Klebb from Russia with Love.
Right.
Again, I'm not sure that really worked, but no, my problem with all of it, and today I went into this to watch this, thinking, okay, let's just go with it and see if I change my mind. And it just feels to me overall as a film, and I'm talking everything from not just the script, but the performances, which I will come on to, but also the way it's shot and the visuals and everything. It seems like it feels like not a cheap knockoff of Indiana Jones to me. And what I mean by that is, even though he is great and his character's great and all of this, an example like the chase through the jungle, okay, having just rewatched as well Raiders for when we talked about that, and I obviously picked the truck chase scene because I've gone into huge detail as to why, but that looks so much more superior to what we got in that jungle chase. The jungle chase looked fake, and it wasn't exciting or gripping or realistic in any way. It was just, and again, it felt like we were playing on the same old jokes that they'd already done, but not as well. So the 3 waterfalls thing that followed that really annoyed me as well, because we'd sort of done that in Temple of Doom once, and it with the inflatable raft, and it sort of worked in that case, but we get it sort of 3 times in a row here, and the joke seemed a bit forced. And to say, I felt a lot of this film felt really forced. Karen Allen, who we talked about a lot on the Raiders one, and complimented her for very good reason. And I've seen her in a lot of stuff, and she's always been great. In this, I was actually surprised on how not good she was. The scene where she was introduced.
Right, podcast over.
No, but I'm sorry. The scene where she was introduced, where she's going, "Take your lousy hands off me," which again is supposed to be a reference back to Raiders, and then she goes, "Indiana Jones," and all that. It just, I don't know. It felt staged, and it just, to me, it had no gravitas to it whatsoever. And the same thing about the reveal of was when they were, because I was going to, remember I said I was going to choose the sinkhole, the quicksand scene, simply because I love the gag of using the snake to get Indy out. I just think that's a wonderful gag, and I did laugh at that bit when I saw it, and I do chuckle every time. But the whole dialogue about, you know, him being the father and him running around, all of that, it just all felt so forced. The only good line in that whole bit was when he was going, "That was the problem, honey. They weren't you." Yeah, that's good, before he goes. But I just, I don't know. I watched it and just thought, this doesn't feel right at all to me. It felt wrong. The other thing is, I know obviously, you know, Spielberg was collaborating with Janusz Kaminski for all of his photography for some time at this point, obviously replacing Douglas Slocum, because he was like in his late 90s at this point and had retired. But, you know, whereas in we all know, we've already talked about it, in the first three films, yes, there was a lot of stunts, but there was also a lot of visual effects, and there was matte paintings and all sorts of things, but they always looked real. It always looked convincing, apart from one or two shots. Watch those episodes. But in this, very little of it looked convincing, and that's right down to creepy crawlies and everything. We knew in the other films that they were real. In this, it's so obvious that it's CG ants. To me, it just doesn't look realistic.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to necessarily be able to get thousands of giant ants.
No, I know, but I'm just saying.
And there's no way that particular shot could have been done. But I take what you mean. I think part of the reason why it films, I was just looking this up while we were talking, part of the reason why it doesn't look as expansive as the other movies is because it was nearly all filmed in the US, apart from there was some stuff done in Hawaii. And I feel like they maybe didn't go as far afield as they would have liked. But, you know, a lot of these guys, as you pointed out, they're in their like 60s and 70s. Oh, yeah. And you don't necessarily want to go on location.
No, I get that. I mean,
and also because
even little quality control things bother me. For example, you know, obviously in the story, Marcus Brody and Henry Jones.
I know what you're going to say. The pictures, right?
Yeah, they use bloody stills from the movie.
I knew it.
I was like, how shit is that?
Because that also got on my nerves.
Yeah, I was just like, what? This is what I mean when I say I feel like, I know a lot of, don't get me wrong, I know what goes into movies, so I'm not saying that a lot of work didn't go into this movie. It absolutely
of course
did.
It does, yeah.
But when I say that I felt like it was somewhat phoned in, these are the reasons I mean. That the little attention to detail and the quality did not feel to me with this film on par with the previous films. I can't, you know, and the whole Ray Winston drove me mad, actually. His character, I found his character annoying, and the sort of, he's a double crosser, but then he's a triple crosser, and now he's back again, you know, all of that. I didn't like that. I didn't like the story much. I didn't like the other characters, even though they're all played by wonderful actors, but I liked them at all.
I like Spalko, and I like the fact that it's a female villain.
Yeah.
Which would be my pick for Bond, actually.
Right.
For Bond to have a female villain just for one. It's like a proper all-out female villain. Because we haven't really seen a female villain in Indiana Jones apart from Schneider. And but she was kind of, you know, the sub-villain.
Yeah. I mean the one thing to be, because I know I'm saying a lot of negative things, to be, if you like, to end my little mini rant on a positive. Obviously, my first positive was Harrison Ford and that opening. Fantastic. My other positive is the ending of this film. And what I mean by that is I thought we had him go off into the sunset at the end of Last Crusade with his dad. But what I did like about this is, he and Marion get married finally, and we have a happy ending, which we thought was an ending, for Indiana Jones. And I really like the fact that there was no way he was passing the mantle. This is Harrison Ford as well, I'm sure. There is no way he was passing that mantle to Shia LaBeouf. He grabbed that hat. No, Junior, it's mine, kind of thing. And I love that. And left.
Have you
Shia
seen? So a few years back, I think when the 5th one was announced, they said, are you sad to see it end? And he was just like, no. And they went, oh, who do you think should play Indiana Jones if they reboot? And he was like, nobody. He goes, that's it. I want it to just be done. And I think there's a lot in that. I think he is quite sort of rightly selfish. I wonder if he felt the same way about Han Solo. I don't think he did, but because as you've pointed out, he seemed to have a lot more fun playing this character than he ever did.
I think he always admitted that of the three franchises he was in, which was Star Wars, this, and Blade Runner. I think Indiana Jones was his favorite of the.
Can we call Blade Runner a franchise?
Wow, more than what? Where he's done more than one movie, then.
I have said this before. I do resent the term franchise because it negates any possibility of art whatsoever. It's just like, oh well, we're just making burgers, and I even though I know that's kind of true, just look at the Fast and the Furious movies. I'm not fond of the term franchise.
All right, then of his films where he's played a character more than once, then let's put it that way.
I'm not having a go at you because it's a widely accepted term.
Yeah,
this isn't a pop at you.
But
I'm just saying that
here's the thing. I'm trying to avoid everything I can about Dial of Destiny. Right, the one thing that slightly worries me before I'm even going into it is the fact that we see Indy at the end here, happy, married to Marion, reunited with his son, or united in this case, not reunited, but relationship with his son, and they're happy. I dread to think what the state of India is going to be at the beginning of Dial of Destiny. I hope it's not another Han Solo where he's estranged from his son and split up with his wife and all of that.
I mean, I don't think we're most certainly not going to see Shia LaBeouf in this film. I'd love to see Karen Allen, even if it's just for one scene. I'd like him to be happy. We know pretty much that Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who she's going to be playing.
No, again, I've tried to avoid it.
Okay, for the purposes of your own sanity, I am not going to say it. It's quite well known out there.
Okay.
Now, who she's supposed to be playing. So, and in fact, the scene that they've got on Disney Plus would give that away somewhat. So make sure you definitely don't watch it.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, Keith, can I just ask you? We got a couple of minutes left? So, did you want to see another Indiana Jones film? Did you want another one made?
If I'm totally honest, I think no, and right. Simply because this one gave him a good ending. Plus, even at this stage, and I've gone on about how great he looks and what good shape he's in, but even in this, people felt he was getting old, and that was 15 years ago. Yeah, you know what I mean. So I think it's interesting. We're going to get a Bond set, Indiana Jones set in the late 60s. And also James Mangold. I am a big fan of his filmography. I think James Mangold's a really good filmmaker. If anybody's going to take over from Spielberg, that's probably the right director to do so. So I've got faith in that. I've just got, as of late, Disney's involvement with Lucasfilm, and Lucasfilm has not been particularly well managed. Let's just put it that way. And I just hope that that Indiana Jones is not going to get destroyed. It's kind of what I'm worried about this time.
I'm really kind of. I'm always curious to see where it goes. As you say, with Mangold, I'm 100% there because I think, Heavy, Copland,
Identity.
Identity is the kind of,
Walk the Line, Logan.
Line I could have done without.
Ford versus Ferrari. Come on,
Ford versus Ferrari is incredible. Logan was incredible. 310 to Yuma, very good film. For me, it's the real early ones. I mean, like Copland, I think is a masterpiece, and Heavy is a masterpiece. I don't know if you've ever seen that, which was his first movie, and it's a gorgeous film. I think they're in safe hands there.
That's one thing that does give me a put it this way. I think it's better to have an enthusiastic James Mangold directing this than Spielberg doing it when he doesn't really want to. And in some respects, I feel that is the problem with Kingdom of Crystal Skull. Is I'm not actually sure that his heart and soul was in this film like a lot of pictures.
We have to remember the last time Mangold did out and out action was Night and Day, which I love, but I love kind of grudgingly, because I think, as with Crystal Skull, some of it looks cheaper than it should. It doesn't quite all hold together, and especially for a Tom Cruise film, there's a lot of stuff that looks like ropey visual effects to me, and it's just like. It feels like the Tom Cruise film where Tom Cruise didn't have as much control over, where
he wasn't a producer.
Yeah. Although I'm sure he was, but still a very entertaining film. And in fact, I watched it again just the other day. I mean, Mangold makes rewatchable cinema. Le Mans '66. Or Ford versus Ferrari, whichever you want to call it, depending on which territory you're in. I still don't know why it underwent the title change over it.
They always do this, but it's whatever's known better, isn't it? But
I think I've watched that 3 or 4 times. I hate racing. Can't stand it. I find it utterly boring. But I absolutely love that movie.
Yeah.
And I think he makes rewatchable cinema. So I'm going to be there opening day, if I can be, and I'm gonna watch that film.
I mean, obviously, I want, just like going into Kingdom of Crystal Skull. I mean, I wanted to like it. As I said, I was like a child before I went in. I was that excited, and likewise, I want to go into this next Indiana Jones and be excited and be satisfied. But we'll see. I've got a little bit of nerves about it. I'm not going to lie. I have got a little bit of nerves about it.
Don't worry, Keith. It's not your 250 million on the line.
Well, there you go. This is their most expensive film, isn't it?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. My God, so it better be good, I guess. But
but I think a lot of things have just got up because of the natural inflation in the intervening years.
Yes.
And also, it's Ford's never cheap, is he? I don't blame him.
But then again, he wanted to do this film.
Yeah.
I saw an interview where he was asked, would you do another Indiana Jones film? And this is around the time of The Force Awakens and interviews for that. And he got asked, would he do another Indiana Jones film? And he said, in a New York minute, in a New York, definitely. So, he wants to do this film, which is obviously a good start.
I mean, I hope people get what they want out of this film, this new film. So, I mean, I certainly enjoyed this. Whilst I don't think it quite lives up to what went before, I still think it's an admirable kind of piece of filmmaking. There's still some good stuff in it and stuff I enjoy, and I'll certainly watch it again.
It's the only one I've not bought the 4K steelbook for. I do have it. I have it on Blu-ray in the Indiana Jones collection set, but I actually I watched it on Disney Plus. You know, the convenience of streaming. What can I say?
I got to say, Keith, the fact that you don't own it on a 4K steelbook is a sad indictment in itself. If you come on, we've got 4 minutes left. Right, let's go. We got to wrap this up. Keith hates coming on my pods because he knows he's going to get rushed. It's always going to be me going, come on.
What else do you want me to? What else do you want to know?
Nothing. I think you've given me my money's worth.
Good.
This evening, and I really want to thank you for coming on and watching a film that we knew would be a difficult one for you to rewatch. So I really appreciate you. Really appreciate the sacrifice. I'm really glad that you got a chance to revisit it. But at least now you know you won't necessarily want to do that again in a hurry.
No, it's funny. It's funny. I just don't. It just, for me, it just lacks watch appeal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not something. If somebody said, "Oh, stick an Indiana Jones movie on this afternoon," I would stick any of them on over this one. It's the truth. Enough. I'm just being completely honest. It's my least favorite of his adventures so far.
Right. Yeah. We got to wrap this up, I'm afraid. You've got to do just a couple of little bits at the end just to say hello and thank you to all the patrons who support the channel. If you'd like to join them, you can do that from £2 a month. And that helps me keep doing this. We do more comic stuff. We are going to be doing more film stuff this year and into next year. Really got an interesting kind of set of programs kind of lined up, including something I hope Keith and I are going to be able to announce soon. But I hope you'll tune in and I hope you'll keep watching, keep checking out the channel, the comic stuff we're doing. I've just come back from MCM. We've hopefully got a nice bunch of interviews set up that are coming soon. And I really hope you'll stick with us throughout that. If you want to know more about 4K and Blu-ray, this man's channel is the one you've got to follow. Home Media Minefield, which you can find on YouTube. There are a ton of great unboxings. If you like unboxings, there are a ton of really good deep dive, long form shows like this about film and TV. Keith always has great guests on. They're always kind of informative. They're always fascinating. In listening to them, I always learn things I didn't know, and I thought I knew a lot about the kind of stuff that we watch and listen to. And you can follow Keith on @HomeMediaMine on Twitter, @HomeMediaMinefield on Instagram, and of course you can follow his page on Facebook. You should follow that right now because it's really good. And also check out his short films as a director and actor, which are all on the British Isles video channel. They're fantastic. It's worth seeing Keith act. I like his stuff, and again, as I've said before on this show, it was how we first met.
It was,
but they're all checking out. Keith, you got anything coming up that you can talk about, either acting wise or on Home Media Minefield?
Well, I on Home Media Minefield. We've just done a Let's See What's Out There live stream. So we did it yesterday, so it's on the channel now, and that was a retrospective on Star Trek Picard. Where I had a panel on for that. I'm hoping to do something very soon within the next month or so, celebrating the 40th anniversary of the mini series. So
fantastic.
I'm in the process of trying to sort that out as we speak.
Nice. Well, I hope we'll get a good guest on for that. Keith does always get good guests, and it's really quite surprising some of the guests he gets. So it's definitely worth checking out his channel. As I've said, at the Comic Crush for me on Instagram and Twitter, and the Comic Crush Facebook page. And do check out the website with reviews about comics, graphic novels, and film. And do check out the web shop if you like comics. I sell comics. So give those a look. Again, all of that helps me keep going and pay my rent, which is kind of critical, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
Keith, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on again. Remember, guys, it's not the years, it's the mileage. And hopefully we'll be back in just a few short days for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Keith and I will arrange that once we're off screen, which is where we're going now. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching.